What is the true price of solitude? What waits for you in the spaces between the sweeping beam of light and the crushing dark of the sea? The role of the lighthouse keeper has long been romanticized, a lonely vigil against the treacherous cliffs and shoals. But the official logs, the declassified Coast Guard reports, and the fragmentary, often redacted diaries tell a different story. They speak of isolation so profound, it becomes a doorway. They document phenomena with no rational explanation, and disappearances that defy all logic. This is verified nightmare, where every story is investigated, every detail corroborated, and every nightmare is real. Tonight, we present 11 accounts from the edge of the world. These are not campfire tales. They are chronicles of the last souls stationed at the most remote outposts humanity ever built. Each case is built on primary source material, distress calls logged by maritime authorities, personal effects recovered by investigators, and testimony from the few who made it back to speak of what they saw. This is a compiled dossier of the most terrifying, verified events ever to occur in a lighthouse. We will begin with the first documented case, the incident that caused the permanent automation of the Griffin Rock Station. Then, we will methodically work through 10 more, each supported by official documentation and eyewitness accounts. By the end of this presentation, you will understand why the profession of lighthouse keeper has all but vanished, and what might still be waiting in those empty towers. If you value the unsettling truth, the kind that lingers in the back of your mind long after the video ends, then hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. What you are about to hear comes from places where the rules of our world grow thin, places where the only witness was the light itself. The Silent Keepers of Griffin Rock. Martin Shaw measured his life in rotations. A retired naval engineer of 58 years, he found a profound peace in the mechanical certainty of the Griffin Rock Light, a stark white tower standing guard over a particularly vicious stretch of the Maine coast. His personnel file, reviewed for this account, described him as physically robust, psychologically stable, and possessed of a technical mindset. He was a creature of habit. Every morning at a.m., he would polish the great Fresnel lens. At noon, he would check the barometer and anemometer, and at precisely p.m., he would wind the clockwork mechanism that turned the light, a task long since made redundant by an electric motor, but one he performed with ritualistic care. For 11 years, his logs were a masterpiece of mundane detail: weather observations, supply levels, maintenance notes. They revealed nothing but competence. The first crack in this pristine reality appeared on October 12th. Shaw's inventory check revealed a discrepancy. 20 gallons of kerosene, the backup fuel for the lamp, were unaccounted for. He noted it in his log with characteristic dryness. Inventory variance in reserve tank B. No evidence of leakage or theft. Measurement error possible, but unlikely given calibrated dipstick. Will monitor. He began monitoring more than just fuel. He noted in his personal diary, later recovered, that the seagulls had stopped nesting on the eastern ledge of the rock. The cacophony that had been a constant backdrop simply vanished over the course of 2 days. He wrote, "Avian absence noted. Unsettling quiet." A week later, the foghorn sounded. This was not in itself unusual. The automated system was triggered by humidity, but the log entry for October 19th reads, "Foghorn activated at 0317 hours. Duration, 3 minutes. Skies clear. Visibility exceeding 10 miles. Manual override engaged at 0320. Sensor diagnostic shows no fault. Unexplained activation." The following night, it happened again. At 0317, the deep, mournful blast echoed across the water. Shaw, now waiting for it, timed it. 3 minutes. He descended to the sensor housing, a small, damp room at the base of the tower. The humidity gauge read a perfectly normal 68%. As he stood there, a single, heavy drop of water fell from the stone ceiling above the sensor, striking the metal housing with a distinct ping. He checked the ceiling. It was dry. Then came the footsteps. Shaw's diary becomes more fragmented here. He wrote of being at his desk on the 2nd floor, updating the log, when he heard a slow, deliberate tread on the spiral staircase. Not from below, but from above. From the lamp room, he described the sound, a solid footfall, with a slight scrape at the end, as if the heel drags, pausing on each landing, descending, each time he would call out, "Who's there?" and descend with his heavy-duty flashlight. The staircase was always empty, the door to the lamp room locked from the inside, as he had left it. He noted the times, 0104, 0104, 0104. The radio operator in Portland later confirmed for investigators that Shaw's scheduled voice reports remained technically perfect, but the operator noted, off the record, that Shaw had begun to ask odd questions. What is our protocol for a relief watch? And has there been any history of multiple keepers stationed here? The reveal was precipitated by a storm. A fierce nor'easter blew in on November 1st, cutting off radio contact for 36 hours. When the skies cleared and the Coast Guard cutter was able to approach, they found the light burning correctly, but Martin Shaw was gone. The interior of the lighthouse was in immaculate order. A half-eaten bowl of stew sat on the table. His log was open. The final entry, timed at 0103 a.m. on November 2nd, stated, "They are on the stairs. I must go up and relieve the watch." A search of the entire islet found no sign of him. His personal diary, found in a drawer, provided the chilling context for his final words. The official investigation, case file #G-77-42, concluded that Shaw had likely been swept out to sea during the storm while checking exterior equipment. But two pieces of verified evidence contradict this. First, the external door showed no signs of being opened during the high winds and lashing rain. The seals were intact, and the interior floors were dry. Second, and most damning, when engineers serviced the clockwork turning mechanism, the one Shaw wound each night, they made a discovery. Tucked inside the gear train, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of paper. It was a complete duplicate set of Shaw's daily logs, covering his entire 11-year tenure. Every entry matched the official copies, save for one added line. On every single page, below Shaw's signature, in handwriting that multiple experts confirmed was his, were the words, "All keepers present and accounted for." The first of these duplicate logs was dated his very first day at Griffin Rock. The aftermath was bureaucratic and final. Griffin Rock was fully automated within months. The verification lies in the physical evidence. The duplicate logs are stored in the National Archives alongside the Coast Guard's report. The file remains open, listed as missing person circumstances unknown. Every few years, a request from a maritime historian or a curious journalist prompts a standard reply. The evidence is inconclusive, but the automation stands. To this day, veteran fishermen passing Griffin Rock will point to the now silent tower and tell you they never look at it after dark. They say if you see a shadow moving across the beam, it's just a trick of the light, but they never say it with conviction. The flare sequence at Sentinel Point. Dr. Ilara Vance approached the Sentinel Point Lighthouse with the mindset of a researcher. Her 6-month contract was a grant-funded opportunity to study unique micro-weather patterns in the Bering Sea, and the 120-foot tower was her perfect, isolated laboratory. At 34, she was pragmatic, data-driven, and mildly amused by the superstitions of mariners. Her predecessor, a grizzled keeper named Finn, conducted the handover with gruff efficiency. As the helicopter prepared to depart, he pulled her aside. His statement was entered into her journal verbatim. "The dark out here. It's a substance. It presses against the glass. You'll hear things on the old channels. Just weather, mostly. But if you get a mayday, coordinates for the trench due west, and they say they're firing a flare at midnight, you log it. You don't answer. You understand? Don't answer." She thanked him, dismissing it as the folklore of loneliness. For 97 days, her routine was a symphony of science. She launched weather balloons, calibrated instruments, and maintained the powerful, rotating beacon. The silence was a gift. The first incident occurred on the night of the new moon. At 11:58 p.m., as she was reviewing spectrograph data, the old VHF marine radio scanner she kept for background noise crackled to life. It was tuned to the international distress frequency, 156.8 MHz. A burst of static, then a voice strained with panic. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the vessel. Engine room taking on water. Position is 5642 north, 15401 west. We are sinking. Firing flare now. The transmission dissolved into a hiss. Alara immediately switched to the active Coast Guard channel and reported the distress call. A Jayhawk helicopter was scrambled from Kodiak. They found a calm, empty sea. No vessel on AIS, no debris, no flare. The official log noted it as a probable false alarm, hoax from a passing ship. Exactly 1 week later, at 11:58 p.m., the scanner erupted again. The same voice, the same coordinates, the same desperate phrase. Firing flare now. This time, Alara was at the western observation window with high-power binoculars. The sea was a black void. At precisely midnight, a brilliant white star burst into existence about 2 miles offshore, illuminating the churning water below for a few seconds before dying. She reported the visual confirmation. The Coast Guard dispatched a cutter. Their side-scan sonar mapped the seabed at the provided coordinates. The depth was over 2,000 fathoms. The captain's unofficial report, which she accessed later, stated plainly, no vessel, sunken or otherwise, could be at that map point. It is an abyssal plain. The sighted flare remains unexplained. The pattern was now established. Every 7 days, the mayday at 11:58, the white flare at midnight. Alara's scientific curiosity overpowered her unease. She began a parallel investigation. She cross-referenced the coordinates with maritime databases. She found it. The SS Peregrine, a trans-Pacific liner reported lost with all 213 souls in a storm in November 1954. The last known position before it vanished was within 5 nautical miles of the coordinates from the radio call. No wreckage was ever found. In the station's physical archive, a dusty ledger from the 1970s, she found a log entry from a keeper named Joe Hansen. Dated January 15, 1978, it read, "Heard distress call west. Observed white flare at 0000. Reported to USC. No contact. Will monitor." The next week's entry was scrawled and shaky. Call repeated. Voice asked for me by name. I acknowledged. I should not have acknowledged. After that, the entry stopped, and the log noted a temporary relief keeper was flown in. The reveal happened on the 6th repetition. Alara was ready, recording the scanner's audio. The mayday came. The same coordinates. But as the voice said, "Firing flare now," it paused. The static cleared for a second. Then, different tone flat, cold, and perfectly clear said, "Keeper Vance, the water is very cold. Will you answer?" Stunned, Alara remained silent. At midnight, the white flare burst. Then, a second later, a red flare exploded just beneath it. Her training was explicit: white for location, red for extreme, immediate peril. The aftermath is catalogued in a Coast Guard Court of Inquiry transcript. Disobeying a direct order to stand by, Alara Vance activated the station's rigid hull inflatable boat and motored toward the flare's origin. The radio operator in Kodiak pleaded with her to return. Her final transmission, at 12:18 a.m., was recorded. Her voice was eerily calm, devoid of its usual analytical edge. She said, "I have visual on the vessel. It's the Peregrine. She's listing, but her lights are on. I can see crew on the foredeck. They're signaling. I'm going alongside to render assistance." Then, only the sound of the boat's engine and the sea. A rescue helicopter located her boat 30 minutes later, adrift and empty, its navigation lights still on. The engine was out of fuel. Lying on the deck was her waterproof logbook. The last entry, timed at 11:59 p.m., contained the coordinates and a single line. I answered. The verification is multi-sourced. The audio recording of the final radio exchange exists. The 1978 ledger entry corroborates the pattern and the danger of response. The maritime history of the SS Peregrine is a matter of public record. The official ruling was lost at sea, presumed deceased, but the case file is stamped with the classification and FLIR 7, denoting an anomalous phenomenon with unresolved elements. The Sentinel Point light is now solar-powered and monitored by satellite. Its operational manual contains a specific, highlighted directive: under no circumstances shall any monitoring equipment be tuned to VHF channel 16 between 2300 and 0 to 00 hours local time. Any anomalous signals are to be recorded but not acknowledged. They never explain why. They don't have to. The tide that breathes at Capelline Rock. Henry Cobb was a third-generation keeper. For him, the Capelline Rock light, perched on a jagged tooth of granite 20 miles off the Welsh coast, was not a job, but an inheritance. A stout, quiet man of 47, he knew every inch of the tower, every groan of its timbers in a gale. His verification comes from the Pembrokeshire Maritime Authority logs and the exhaustive inquest that followed. Cobb was known for his detailed sketches of seabirds and marine life, which he mailed to his sister every month. His logs from that final season note an unusual proliferation of bioluminescent plankton in the waters surrounding the rock, turning the waves a persistent, eerie green on calm nights. He found it beautiful. The first irregularity was not a sound, but an absence of it. Cobb logged on September 3rd that the usual crash of waves against the eastern base of the rock had ceased. For a period of approximately 4 hours each night, beginning at sunset, the sea around Capelline Rock became as smooth and silent as a mill pond, despite weather reports confirming moderate swells in the surrounding area. He described it in a letter: "Is as if the rock is sitting in a bowl of oil. The water doesn't lap, it just rests against the stone. You can hear your own blood in your ears." Then, the sounds within the tower began. A persistent, damp dripping sound would manifest in the lower storage room, directly beneath the freshwater tank. Yet, upon inspection, the floor and ceiling were bone dry. He noted the sound moved, sometimes seeming to come from behind the stacked sacks of flour, sometimes from within the brickwork itself. The incidents escalated from auditory to physical. Cobb began to find small, wet footprints on the spiral staircase in the mornings. They were not human. They were small, webbed, with 3 long toes and a central pad, and they always led upwards, from the base door to the lamp room, and then vanished on the dry oak planks of the upper landing. He measured 1.5 inches from heel to longest toe. He sketched it in his log with the zoologist's precision, writing unknown origin. Not consistent with any local seabird, cormorant, gull, puffin. Resembles primate or amphibian morphology. No mud or seaweed residue, only salt water. He set flour on the stairs to capture a print. The next morning, the flour was undisturbed, but a new set of wet prints was superimposed over the old ones. The final week of logs shows a man clinging to rationality while documenting the impossible. The breathing sound started on September 18th. It was a low, rhythmic, wet inhalation and exhalation that seemed to emanate from the very rock the lighthouse stood upon. It was most audible in the lowest room, the one cut directly into the granite foundation. Cobb wrote, "The rhythm is slow, perhaps 6 cycles per minute. It is not the wind. It is not the sea. It is the sound of something large and very close, sleeping." On the night of September 20th, the smooth, silent water around the rock began to move, not with waves, but with a slow, concentric pulsing, as if the sea itself was expanding and contracting in time with the breathing sound from below. The reveal came from the supply boat. The Malian was due on the 22nd, but was delayed by weather until the 25th. When the boat's captain, Geraint Evans, approached, he saw the light was dark. He radioed the authority. Upon forcing the door, the search party found Henry Cobb's world in perfect, morbid order. A cold pot of tea on the stove. His bed neatly made. His logbook was open on the desk in the watchroom. The final entry, dated September 21st, read, "The tide is going out. It is not following the moon. It is following the breath. It has breathed in for so long. Tonight, it will breathe out. I must secure the hatches." But Cobb was not in the tower. They found his waterproof coat and boots still on their peg. His final sketch was discovered pinned to the wall above his desk. It was not of a bird. It was a detailed, cross-sectional drawing of Capitoline Rock itself, done in expert geological detail, and there, drawn in the very heart of the granite, surrounded by a network of what looked like vast, cavernous chambers, was a shape. It was sinuous, bulbous, annotated with arrows pointing to the breathing pores and buoyancy sacs. At the bottom, in shaky letters, he had written, "It doesn't live on the rock. It is the rock, and it's waking up. The aftermath is a matter of public record." The official inquest returned a verdict of death by misadventure, presumed drowned, citing Cobb's probable attempt to secure exterior equipment during a strange tidal event. The verification, however, lies in the corroborating testimony of Captain Evans and the 3 crewmen of the Malian. All 4 independently stated that on their approach, during a period of a declared incoming tide, the sea around Capitoline Rock was receding at an impossible rate, exposing barnacle-crusted stone that had never been seen above water. And as they watched, just before they entered the tower, the entire mass of Capitoline Rock seemed to shudder and settle, as if something beneath it had exhaled. The Capitoline Rock light was automated within the year. Mariners now give it a wide berth, not because of the shoals, but because of the charts. On modern navigational systems, the depth soundings around the rock are inconsistent, fluctuating by dozens of fathoms with no relation to the tide tables, as if the seabed itself is still breathing. The calibration. Leo Atler was an artist, a painter of stark, minimalist seascapes. The remote Norwegian lighthouse on the islet of High was his grant-funded retreat for the winter, a trait of basic maintenance for solitude and inspiration. The Norwegian Coastal Administration file notes he was physically fit, a competent amateur radio operator, and had passed all psychological screenings. His early reports, filed weekly, were enthusiastic, filled with descriptions of the sublime Arctic light. He mentioned only one quirk. The previous keeper had left behind an antique brass barometer, its face etched with intricate, non-meteorological symbols around the dial. It was permanently stuck, the needle pointing unwavering to a symbol that resembled a stylized eye. Leo found it charming. The inciting incident was a malfunction of the modern equipment. On January 14th, during a polar night storm, the satellite uplink for the automated light failed. Protocol required Leo to manually activate the backup acetylene system. He did so, and the great beam began its slow sweep. But as he monitored it, he noticed a discrepancy. The beam's rotation, measured by the shadow it cast through a window, completed a full circle in exactly 60 seconds. The timing mechanism in the control panel, however, audibly clicked every 59 seconds, 1 second per revolution unaccounted for. He noted it as a curiosity, a potential mechanical lag. The following night, he timed it with a stopwatch. Light beam, 60.0 seconds. Control panel click, 59.0 seconds. The discrepancy was precise and constant. Leo, with an artist's eye for pattern, began to observe other inconsistencies. He kept a metronome for drawing exercises. He found that if he set it to 60 beats per minute, it would slowly fall out of sync with the clock on the satellite radio, gaining roughly 1 beat every hour. Yet, the clock and the light's control panel remained in perfect sync with each other. It was as if 2 separate flows of time were operating in the lighthouse, one for the machines, and one for everything else, including him. His personal logs become filled with obsessive calculations and diagrams. He wrote, "The gap is not an error. It is a measurement." But of what? The buildup was a quiet unraveling. Leo began experiencing periods of lost time. He would be reading a book, glance at the clock, and then look up to find an hour had passed. Yet his tea was still hot. The sun, during its brief daily appearance, seemed to skid across the horizon faster than it should. He became fixated on the stuck barometer. Using charcoal, he made a rubbing of its strange symbols. In a burst of insomnia-driven research on his offline encyclopedia database, he found a match. The symbols were not decorative. They were from an obscure 18th century Danish philosophical sect that believed time was not a river, but a spiral, and that certain places existed as knots or calibration points in its fabric. The reveal happened on the night of the spring equinox. The satellite link was restored, but Leo had already disconnected the automatic systems, obsessed with measuring the temporal discrepancy himself. At local midnight, as recorded in the final data burst sent from the Lighthouse's systems, three things happened simultaneously. The control panel clicked, the beam passed the north-facing window, and the needle on the antique barometer moved for the first time. It didn't shift to storm or fair, it jumped backwards, against all physical law, to settle on a symbol like a closed spiral. In that instant, Leo later stated to investigators, the sound of the wind, the crash of the waves, the hum of the generator, all of it ceased. For a period, his watch recorded as 59 seconds, there was absolute vacuum silence. And in that silence, he saw the light beam, frozen in the sea fog outside, illuminate something vast and geometric on the horizon, a structure of impossible angles that seemed to be both there and not there. Then the sound rushed back in, and the barometer needle was stuck again now on the spiral. The aftermath is verified by the Norwegian Coastal Administration's technical report. They found Leo Atler in a state of severe shock, but physically unharmed. All the lighthouse's digital clocks were exactly 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 33 seconds behind the atomic time standard from the restored satellite signal. All of Leo's mechanical watches and the metronome were perfectly synchronized with the Lighthouse's original control panel clock. The official report blamed a cascading power surge for the timekeeping errors and dismissed Leo's testimony as a hallucination brought on by isolation. However, the addendum to the report classified for a decade before release notes the unexplained permanent magnetization of the antique barometer's needle and the fact that the celestial navigation logs from ships passing high that night showed a brief uncorrectable anomaly in stellar positioning. Leo never painted again. He works as a clockmaker in Oslo, known for the preternatural accuracy of his repairs. He has only ever given one statement about his time on high, filed with his doctor and later leaked. We think we keep the light to warn ships of the rocks, but what if the light is there to warn something else that we are here? And what if, once in a great while, it needs to be calibrated? The echo of the Lady's Mercy. The posting to the Skelton Shoal Light was considered punishment duty. A skeletal iron cage bolted to a submerged reef in the North Atlantic. It was accessible only by a harrowing cable winch from a tender ship. Thomas Macready, a 40-year-old veteran with a disciplinary record for insubordination, was sent there for a 6-month tour in 1987. According to the Canadian Coast Guard personnel file, he was a capable engineer, but prone to paranoia and antagonism. The Lighthouse, a hollow, rusting cylinder, was infamous for its acoustics. Winds would howl through its girders, creating a constant, low moan. Macready's early logs complain about the noise, describing it as like a ship dying in a high wind. The first anomaly was a voice within the moan. About 3 weeks into his tour, during a force 8 gale, Macready's log notes, the winds dropped a tone. Can make out words, sounds like, aft hold, and, mercy, auditory pareidolia, will monitor. He began to record the wind noise on a reel-to-reel tape deck, a personal item he'd brought. Playing it back at slow speed, he isolated more phrases. They were faint, layered over each other, a cacophony of desperate voices. She's listing. Children to the boats, cold, so cold. The clearest phrase, repeated like a chorus, was, "The lady shows no mercy." A search of maritime archives in his limited library revealed the likely source. The SS Lady's Mercy, a passenger liner lost with all 400 aboard after striking an uncharted shoal in 1922. The shoal was later named for the Lighthouse's first keeper, Skelton. The incidents grew more direct. Macready reported hearing the distinct sound of a ship's bell, ringing 7 times, from outside the tower during dead calms. He would feel vibrations through the iron framework, not from waves, but rhythmic and heavy, like the footfalls of a giant. His most chilling log entry reads, December 3rd, woke to sound of knocking, not on the hatch above, on the underside of the main deck grating. From below the waterline, 3 sets of knocks, paused, then 3 again, like someone, or something, tapping on the outside of the hull. Except we're not a ship. He used a hydrophone, part of the station's outdated detection equipment, and lowered it into the water. The recording, later analyzed by investigators, contained, beneath the usual sea sounds, a dense soup of muffled cries, splintering wood, and the terrible, sustained groan of metal under stress. The reveal was precipitated by a systems failure. A generator overload knocked out primary power, including the radio and the main light. McCready, following protocol, began manually cranking the backup emergency light, a feeble oil lamp with a mirrored reflector. As he worked, the wind died completely. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. Then, the knocking began again. This time, it was not random. It was a sequence: 3 knocks, a pause, 2 knocks, a pause, then 4 knocks. It traveled around the circumference of the tower, just below the waterline. In his official testimony, McCready stated that a voice, clear as day and close to his ear, whispered. The light went out. He spun, finding nothing. That's when he saw the faces in the porthole glass. Not reflections. Pale, water-swollen faces pressed against the outside of the thick glass, staring in with empty eyes. The sea was 20 feet below the porthole. McCready's final coherent act was to restore the main light. He jury-rigged the generator, and the powerful beam stabbed back into the night. The moment it did, the knocking stopped. The faces vanished. The wind resumed its normal howl. He managed to send a frantic, broken mayday the next morning, which was picked up by a passing freighter. The aftermath is detailed in the Coast Guard's medical and psychological evaluation. McCready was retrieved in a state of acute psychosis. He was repeating the phrase "she's taking on water" and trying to lifeboats that did not exist. The verification lies in the physical evidence. Technicians servicing the lighthouse found deep, concussive denting on the iron support pillars below the waterline, consistent with repeated, heavy impact. More critically, McCready's reel-to-reel tapes were analyzed by a naval acoustics lab. Their report confirmed the presence of structured auditory phenomena resembling human speech layered within wind noise. And, on the hydrophone recording, a clear sequence of Morse code tapped against the hull. The sequence translated to SOS, Lady, Mercy, all lost. The Skelton show-light was automated shortly after. Mariners' charts for the area now carry a peculiar advisory note. Vessels experiencing anomalous acoustic events or mechanical failure are advised to illuminate all external lights. Historical data suggests luminosity is a mitigating factor. They do not explain what it mitigates. The Keeper of the Dusk. Anya Petrova volunteered for the Bolshaya Litsa station in the Russian Arctic. A former geologist with the Polar Research Institute, she saw it as a final, quiet posting before retirement. The Soviet-era concrete tower was a brutalist slab, but it commanded a view of the hauntingly beautiful, ice-choked coastline. Her records, partially declassified in the 1990s, show she was exemplary, with the special note praising her stoic temperament. Her personal journal, smuggled out by a friend, describes the long polar night not with dread, but with scientific fascination. She was particularly interested in the prolonged twilight, the dusk that could last for weeks, a world of perpetual deep blue and indigo shadows. The inciting incident was a navigational error. On November 15th, a Finnish icebreaker radioed a query. Their inertial navigation was malfunctioning, placing them 30 nautical miles west of their visual and stellar fixes. They asked if the Bolshaya Litsa light was operating on its published characteristics. Anya confirmed it was, a white flash every 10 seconds. The icebreaker captain replied, confused, stating they were observing a red flash from her approximate position, on a 15-second cycle. Anya checked her equipment. All systems were green. She went outside into the biting cold. She saw her own light, white, 10 seconds, but on the horizon, to the northwest, she saw a second, faint pulse, a deep, bloody red. It flashed once every 15 seconds exactly. There was no other structure on the charts for 200 miles in that direction. Her investigation was methodical. She used a theodolite to pinpoint the red light's bearing. It was constant. She ruled out atmospheric refraction, as the phenomenon persisted through clear weather and storms. She noted in her journal, "It is not a reflection. It is a source. Its timing is absolute, a perfect counter-rhythm to my own." She began to experience subtle disorientation within the tower. Her shadow, cast by the interior lamps, would sometimes fall in the wrong direction, as if sourced from an unseen light. Her wristwatch would gain exactly 5 minutes every night at midnight, a fact she verified against the tower's chronometer. The world, it seemed, was developing a slight but measurable warp around the distant red pulse. The buildup was marked by a chilling inversion. During the weeks of perpetual dusk, Anya would sometimes see dark shapes moving out on the pack ice. Not polar bears. They were tall, slender, and moved with an unnerving fluidity. They never approached the tower. They simply stood and watched the red light. One night, her journal entry reads, "I aimed the spotlight. They did not scatter. They turned, not to face the light, but to face me. Their eyes reflected red, not white." The final clue came from a moldering, uncatalogued manual in the tower's basement, printed in 1952. It contained a brief, blacked-out paragraph about auxiliary beacon protocol and a hand-drawn diagram showing the Bolshaya Litsa light and another, labeled only Sestra, sister. The diagram illustrated the two lights flashing in an alternating rhythm, with a note in cramped Cyrillic to define the border, to keep the dusk from settling. The reveal occurred on the day the sun was due to return, a date marked on her calendar for months. The sky lightened to its usual twilight blue, but progressed no further. The sun did not crest the horizon. The red light on the horizon, however, grew brighter. Enya's own light began to falter, its generator sputtering despite full fuel tanks. As her white flashes grew erratic, the red flashes intensified, and the period of darkness between them seemed to deepen, to become more substantial. She realized with the geologist's cold logic, the two lights were not warnings. They were a balancing mechanism. Her light held back the permanent dusk that the red light represented, and her light was failing. The aftermath is pieced together from the last automated radio burst from the tower, and the investigation launched after all contact ceased. Enya's final journal entry, written as her light died completely, states, "Sestra is awake. The dusk is not an absence of light. It is a presence, and it is coming ashore. I must go to the auxiliary shed. There is a manual flare system. Perhaps I can be the light." The rescue team found the tower empty and cold. The generator was full of fuel, but would not start. All the emergency flares were gone from the shed. A single, spent flare gun was found on the observation deck, pointed toward the northwest. The most verified and most haunting detail comes from the logs of a Norwegian meteorological satellite. Its low-light sensor captured an image of the Russian coastline that night. It shows the Bolshaya Litsa Tower dark, but approximately 30 nautical miles out on the frozen sea, where no structure exists. The image shows a small, intense point of white light, the signature of a high-intensity flare that burned for exactly 6 minutes before winking out. From its position, a long, deep shadow was cast across the ice, pointing directly toward the shore. The Bolshaya Litsa station is now robotic. Its operational parameters, obtained through FOIA requests, show a curious firmware command. If the main light fails, the system is programmed to fire all emergency flares in sequence on a bearing of 305 degrees northwest. It is a protocol with no nautical purpose. It is a ritual. The stain at Gannet's Nest. Arthur Pembleton was a retired librarian, a man whose life was defined by order and silence. The Gannet's Nest light on the remote Scottish Isle of Stack Ruid suited him perfectly. His contract with the Northern Lighthouse Board stated he was responsible for general upkeep and meteorological observation. He was fastidious. His logs, now housed in the board's archives, are models of neat penmanship, detailing wind speeds, bird migrations, and the precise amount of brass polish used each week. The first log entry of note is from May 7th, concerning a stain. It had appeared on the interior eastern wall of the lantern room, a patch of damp roughly the size of a dinner plate, grayish-yellow in color. He noted it was unlike common condensation, and attempted to treat it with the bleach solution. The stain faded for a day, then returned, darker. The inciting incident was not the stain itself, but its behavior. Pembleton began to chart it. The stain migrated, not by spreading, but by vanishing from one spot, and reappearing on another wall, always within the lantern room, always the same size and hue. It moved approximately 18 inches every 24 hours, tracing a slow, deliberate path around the circular room. He documented this with dated photographs, the prints later included in the board's inquiry. He wrote, "The movement is clockwise. It does not soak the stone. It rests upon it, like a watermark. It is cool to the touch. Even when the sun heats the glass, he became obsessed with its root, marking its past and predicted positions with chalk. The pattern was a perfect, tightening spiral, beginning at the outer wall, and slowly working its way toward the center of the room, directly beneath the great lens. The build-up involved the corruption of his beloved order." Pembleton's meticulously kept books, left on a shelf in the living quarters, began to show similar stains on their pages. Not moisture damage, but the same gray-yellow discoloration, forming faint, geometric patterns in the margins. His daily weather readings started to deviate from those reported by the nearest automated buoy. His barometer consistently showed pressure a few millibars lower, his thermometer a fraction of a degree colder. It was as if the lighthouse was slowly separating from the local climate, becoming its own insulated micro-environment, defined by the stain's presence. The final, personal violation came when he found the first stain on his own skin, a small, gray-yellow patch on the back of his left hand. It was numb to the touch. The reveal was a culmination of his own meticulous data. Pembleton had calculated the stain would reach the exact center of the lantern room floor on the night of the summer solstice. He resolved to witness it. As recorded in his final log entry, timed at 11:47 p.m., he sat in the lantern room, a tape measure laid across the floor. The stain, as predicted, had reached the central point. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, at exactly midnight, according to his wristwatch, the stain began to bleed. Not liquid, but shadow. A darkness seeped out from its edges, flowing across the floorboards against the grain of the wood, forming lines and angles. It was a blueprint. As Pembleton stared, the shadow lines resolved into a perfect, inverted architectural diagram of the Gannet's Nest lighthouse itself, but with an extra chamber depicted beneath the foundation, a room that did not exist on any official plan. At the heart of this phantom chamber on the floor, the original stain pulsed once, softly. Arthur Pembleton was found 6 days later by the supply tender. He was in the lantern room, seated cross-legged in the exact center of the floor. He was alive but unresponsive, in a state of profound catatonia. The medical examiner's report noted the curious, localized pallor of his skin, as if circulation had been systematically muted in certain areas. The verification lies in the physical evidence. The stain was gone from the walls and the books, but on the lantern room floor, centered perfectly, a permanent gray-yellow discoloration had been baked into the wood. More critically, when the Northern Lighthouse Board later conducted structural radar scans of the foundation, their sensors confirmed an anomaly, a void in the bedrock directly beneath the tower's central pillar, matching the dimensions of the chamber in Pembleton's shadow blueprint. It was sealed, with no visible entrance, its contents unknown. Pembleton never spoke again. He remains in a care facility, where nurses note he will occasionally, with a trembling finger, trace slow, clockwise spirals on his bedsheet. The Gannet's Nest light still operates. Maintenance crews report an unusual chill in the lantern room, regardless of the weather, and a persistent, dry, papery smell no cleaning can eliminate. The last broadcast of was per. The Sandpoint Light in Rhode Island was a quaint, historical station, more tourist attraction than Vital Sentinel. In 1998, the Coast Guard installed a new keeper, Liam Byrne, partly as a caretaker, partly to manage the volunteer tour groups. Liam was a radio enthusiast. He converted a small storage room into a ham radio shack, broadcasting a weekly show, Island Static, on low wattage AM, a mix of weather, local history, and old vinyl records. His FCC logs show his broadcasts were perfectly legal, hobbyists' passion. The station's call sign was per. Listeners on the mainland recalled his show as charmingly eccentric. The inciting incident was interference. During his October 23 broadcast, while playing a Glenn Miller record, another signal bled through. It was another radio show. The audio quality was muffled, distant, but clear enough to hear a different DJ speaking in a rapid, excited patter, introducing a Benny Goodman song. The songs overlapped, a ghostly big band echo. Liam's log notes he checked his equipment and all local frequencies. There was no other licensed broadcaster in range. He shrugged it off as atmospheric skip, but it happened the next week, and the next. The interfering show, which he dubbed the Phantom Broadcast, always mirrored his own format, but was about 30 seconds ahead, and the music was always from an earlier era. His listeners began to call in, some amused, some unsettled, asking about the echo. The buildup was a slow synchronization. Liam began to experiment. He changed his music genre to 90s grunge. The Phantom Broadcast bled through with late 70s punk. He read a news item about the Clinton impeachment. The Phantom Broadcast discussed the Nixon hearings. It was always a historical parallel, lagging roughly 20 years behind. Then, the interference became responsive. During a segment where Liam took a call from a listener named Frank, the Phantom Broadcast crackled through with the caller also named Frank, asking a question that was eerily similar. Liam's journal entry from this period reads, "It's not an echo, it's a reflection." But a reflection from when? He started recording the Phantom Broadcasts. Spectral analysis showed no carrier wave. The signal appeared to be generated locally, within the lighthouse itself. The events turned personal. One night, doing a solo broadcast, Liam spoke about his late father. The Phantom Broadcast cut in, and a voice with his father's distinctive Boston accent said, "I'm proud of you, kid." It was a phrase his father had never said. Liam, shaken, did the broadcast early. The next day, he played the recording for a fellow ham operator on the mainland. The friend heard only static. The Phantom audio was on the tape, but only Liam could hear it. The lighthouse itself seemed to be adapting to him. He'd find his microphone moved, his records rearranged to play in a different order. The final piece of the puzzle came from a dusty box of historical documents in the basement. He found a faded photograph from the 1970s of a previous keeper, a man named Carl, standing in front of the same radio equipment. The logbook from Carl's tenure had one underlined entry: "The tower remembers. It likes the company. Don't give it yours." The reveal happened on the night of his final broadcast. We've got a fantastic show for you tonight. Live from the Sandpoint Light. Plenty of time left on the watch. And then the music swelled, a song Liam had never owned, but which his father loved. He watched in horror as his equipment, powered off at the wall, lit up. VU meters danced. The turntable spun of its own accord. A voice, a perfect mimic of his own, but tinged with a hollow, metallic resonance, began to host his show. It was reading his prepared notes, playing his records, but it was doing so without him. Liam Byrne fled the lighthouse that night, taking only his personal log. The Coast Guard found the radio room powered and active, tuned to an unauthorized frequency that shouldn't have been reachable. All the equipment was decades older in appearance, though the serial numbers were correct. The verification comes from multiple, independent sources. First, Liam's personal recordings, when analyzed by an audio forensic lab, contained the Phantom Broadcast, but its waveform was inverted, a literal audio mirror. Second, several loyal listeners on the mainland submitted notarized statements that they heard Liam's final broadcast, but reported it sounded odd, like he had a bad cold, and that the music played was not what he had advertised. Sandpoint is still a museum. The radio room is sealed behind a glass panel. Volunteers swear that sometimes when the building is empty, the old vacuum tubes inside the decommissioned transmitter glow with a faint amber light, and if you press your ear to the glass, you can just make out the whisper of a swing band playing from another time. The doctrine of tides. Elias Vance was a man of faith, a lay minister who saw his posting to the tidal island light of St. Brigid's Cradle as a spiritual retreat. The island was accessible by a narrow causeway for only 3 hours at low tide. Otherwise, it was surrounded by the hungry North Sea. Diocesan records show he was a gentle, contemplative man, and his early logs are filled with psalms and observations of God's glory in the seascape. He was also a keen amateur geologist, often noting the unique, layered sedimentary rock of the island itself, which resembled the pages of a massive stone book. The inciting incident was a discovery in the tide pools. During an exceptionally low spring tide, a swath of the seabed around the island's western flank was exposed. There, etched into the flat bedrock, Elias found a series of grooves. They were not natural. They formed concentric circles, intricate spirals, and what looked like cuneiform or runic lettering of no known language. He sketched them in his log, noting they were only visible during a tidal coefficient greater than 110, a rare event. He wrote, "It is a scripture, but not one for man. The sea is the pen, the land the parchment." He began to study the tides with a fervor that blended faith and science, correlating the exposure of certain glyphs with specific lunar phases. The buildup was a gradual shift in doctrine. Elias's radio sermons, broadcast weekly to a small local congregation, began to change. He stopped referencing the Bible and started speaking of the older gospel written in the pull of the moon, and the sanctity of the deep, empty places. Listeners grew concerned. His physical health also declined. His logs note persistent dehydration and salt cracks on his skin. Despite ample fresh water, he reported hearing a low hymn during high tide, a vibrating hum that seemed to come from the rock beneath the lighthouse. He attempted to transcribe it as musical notes, but the sequence was arrhythmic, chaotic, yet felt intentional. The final, personal break came when he ceased winding the light's clockwork mechanism. His log entry states, "The true beacon is not my flame. It is the obedience of the water. The light is an insult to the dark. I will let it fail." The reveal was delivered by the sea itself. After a week of the light being dark, causing several near groundings, the lifeboat was launched. They arrived at low tide, traversing the causeway. They found the lighthouse door sealed from the inside with wax and seaweed. Forcing it, they found the interior damp, every surface glittering with salt. Elias Vance was on his knees in the main room, facing the western wall. He was alive, but his eyes were milk white with cataracts, his lips moving silently. Before him, drawn in wet salt on the stone floor, was a perfect, large-scale replica of the glyphs from the tidal basin. In the center of the design was the lighthouse's great Fresnel lens, shattered into pieces and arranged like a sunburst. Most chillingly, the tide chart on the wall was not a forecast, but a history. Elias had marked every high and low tide for the past month. But then the lines continued off the page, plotting the tides for the next 1,000 years, in meticulously calculated, decreasing amplitudes. The final notation at the end of the arc read, "And then the page turns. Amen. The aftermath is a matter of Coast Guard and ecclesiastical record." Elias was committed to a psychiatric institution, where he never spoke, but would compulsively measure and drink his water in precise, tidal intervals. The verification lies in the physical evidence. Surveyors sent to document the tidal glyphs found them exactly as Elias had sketched. A marine archaeologist confirmed they were man-made, but their age was impossible to determine due to tidal erosion. However, the most conclusive proof came from satellite data. When researchers superimposed Elias's predicted tidal patterns from his wall chart onto gravitational models, they found a 99.8% correlation for the next 50 years. after which his predictions deviated from modern science, showing the tides gradually diminishing to nothing. St. Brigid's cradle was automated, and the causeway was deliberately dynamited to prevent access. The local diocese quietly struck Elias's name from their rolls. Fishermen now call the area the Preacher's Shelf, and note that their depth finders often show the submerged glyphs as a series of unnervingly geometric readings on their screens, as if the seafloor itself is speaking in data. The closed circuit. The Hafren Flats installation was less a lighthouse and more an industrial platform, a steel and concrete structure standing in the muddy estuary of a great river, guiding tankers to a nearby port. The keeper, Aris Thorne, was an ex-military communications specialist. His job was maintenance and security. The platform was equipped with a powerful rotating beacon, foghorns, and a state-of-the-art, closed-circuit television system with 12 cameras covering every external angle. The system recorded on a 72-hour loop. Aris's logs, obtained through a Port Authority FOIA request, are technical, dry, and focus entirely on system integrity. The inciting incident was a camera glitch. Reviewing the previous night's footage, Aris noted a 3-second dropout on camera 7, which covered the north-facing service ladder. The screen filled with black and white static at 2:14 a.m., then returned to the normal image. He ran diagnostics. All systems were nominal. The next night, it happened again. Same camera, same time, 2:14 a.m. The static had a pattern to it, a slight pulsing. He isolated the feed. Audio, recorded by the camera's microphone, captured a low-frequency hum during the static burst. This was not in the protocol. There was nothing out there that could cause such targeted interference. He began reviewing all camera feeds from the 2:14 a.m. timestamp. On the fourth night, he saw it. Not on camera 7, but on camera 4, pointing east over the empty flats. For a single frame, 1/30th of a second, a figure stood knee-deep in the distant mud, facing the platform. It was tall, thin, and entirely still. The next frame was normal. The buildup was a systematic assault on his surveillance. The glitches began to propagate. Camera 9 would fail, then camera 2, always at 2:14 a.m., always for 3 seconds. The static patterns grew more complex, resembling fuzzy, distorted faces. The audio hum resolved into something almost like whispered speech, but backward. Aris, the technician, fought back. He installed a standalone battery-powered camera in his living quarters, pointed at the door, recording to a separate, encrypted hard drive. He increased the gain on the external microphones. His logs become frantic with technical jargon as he tries to isolate the signal source. The climax of his investigation came when he synchronized all 12 camera feeds from a single 2:14 a.m. event. Played simultaneously, the 3 seconds of static from each camera created a coherent, interlaced image. When layered, it was a clear, if distorted, picture of the interior of the lighthouse's control room, from a perspective high in the corner where there was no camera. It was a view of him, sitting at his desk, from inside the room. The reveal was inevitable. On the night of the winter solstice, Aris decided to stay awake, to watch the feeds live. He sat in the control room, the bank of 12 monitors glowing before him. At 2:13 a.m., all the exterior feeds went black, not to static, to pure, perfect black. The only functioning image was from his secret, internal camera, showing his own back as he sat at the console. On that internal feed, he watched himself. He watched as the door behind him, which he had deadbolted, silently opened. On his live view of the room, the door remained shut. On the internal camera's recorded view, something tall and wire-thin, with limbs that seemed to bend in too many places, slid through the doorway. It moved behind his chair. He felt nothing. He saw nothing on the live feeds but black. On the recorded internal feed, he watched as the thing leaned over his shoulder, its featureless head turning to look directly into the lens of his hidden camera. At that moment, 2:14 a.m., every single monitor in the room, including the live feed from the internal camera, switched to the same image, a close-up of Aris Thorne's own face, contorted in a silent scream, taken from a perspective inches away. The footage looped for 3 seconds, Then all systems returned to normal. The aftermath is documented in a terse Port Authority incident report. Arise Thorne was found in a catatonic state, seated before the console. All system logs showed normal operation, with no record of the blackout or the looped image. The only anomaly was the contents of his encrypted hard drive. It contained the synchronized footage of the control room from the interior camera, exactly as described. The verification is the footage itself, which was reviewed by multiple security contractors. Their analysis confirmed it was not doctored. The data packets were recorded in real time. Furthermore, a review of the platform's maintenance history showed that the original CCTV system had been installed after a previous keeper vanished in the 1980s. The work order specified full coverage of all external surfaces to prevent unauthorized boarding. The Haffron Flats light is now fully remote operated. The CCTV system remains, but with a new, overriding command in its programming. If all external feeds are lost simultaneously for any period exceeding 1 second, the system is not to reboot. Instead, it is to trigger a complete lockdown, seal all hatches, and broadcast a continuous, full-spectrum radio screech on all maritime frequencies. It is a protocol designed not to keep something out, but to trap something in. The last log of the Keeper's Folly. Julian Marsh took the posting at the Tempest Cape Light for the money. A skilled machinist with a mountain of debt. The 2-year contract with the private shipping consortium offered hazard pay that bordered on the absurd. The light was a modern monstrosity, a sleek titanium and composite tower built on a volcanic spit in the South Pacific, designed to withstand Category 5 cyclones. Its logs were fully digital, synced via satellite to the company's headquarters in Singapore. Julian's early entries are brief and professional, focused on the performance metrics of the turbine generators and the desalination plant. His only complaint, noted in a personal email to a friend, was the dreamless sleep. "It's like being switched off," he wrote. "No dreams, just black. I kind of miss them." The inciting incident was a mechanical failure, but not of the lighthouse. It was of the satellite uplink. A solar flare caused a 3-day communications blackout. Standard protocol was to maintain the light and wait. During this isolation, Julian, for the first time, dreamed. It was a vivid, repetitive dream. He was standing not in the tower, but on the black volcanic rock outside, watching the sea recede. Not like a tide, but like a drain being pulled, the water sliding away with a deep, sucking roar, revealing a seabed of smooth, glossy stone that stretched to the horizon. And in the center of that exposed plain stood another lighthouse, not his, an older one built of crumbling granite, its lamp dark. He would wake each time with a start, his heart pounding, just before the waters in the dream rushed back in. When the satellite link restored, he downloaded the backlog of automated system reports. One line item stood out. During the blackout, the main lamp had consumed 0.7% more power than its efficiency curves predicted. The anomaly was flagged and dismissed by head office as a sensor glitch. The buildup was a fusion of data and dread. Julian began sleeping in fits, and the dream evolved. Now, in the dream, he would approach the old lighthouse. Its door was ajar. He could hear a sound from within, the steady, rhythmic click of a clockwork mechanism that had no business still functioning. He never entered. He started cross-referencing. He accessed the consortium's historical database, digging through the geological surveys for Tempest Cape. He found it. Before the modern tower was built, there had been plans for a Victorian-era light on the same spot. The plans were abandoned after the supply ship, the Keeper's Folly, vanished with all hands while delivering the foundation stones in 1888. The wreck was never found. The coordinates of its last known position were less than a nautical mile from the Cape. Julian, the pragmatist, began to suspect he wasn't dreaming. He was receiving a broadcast, a residual one, trapped in the stone and metal of the place. The reveal was both technological and visceral. A major storm system bore down on the Cape. Julian battened down the tower, which hummed with the strain of the hurricane-force winds. The satellite link degraded to a trickle of data, and then, the power to the main lamp failed. Not the tower's power, the lights and screens remained on, but the circuit feeding the 10 million candle power xenon arc lamps simply died. Diagnostics showed a phantom overload. In the howling dark, with only the emergency LED strip lights glowing, Julian knew what he had to do. It was in the oldest paper manual, a relic left in a drawer. Instructions for the manual crank override of the lens rotation. As the storm screamed outside, he opened the access panel and began to turn the heavy iron crank. Each rotation made a loud, solid click. With each click, the great lens, freed from its silent electric motor, began to turn, its beam powered by the emergency battery-fed bulb. Click, click, click. The rhythm was familiar. It was the sound from his dream. He lost count of the clicks. The beam swept across the raging sea. And then, during one pass to the southeast, the beam illuminated something in the water. Not wreckage. A structure, a crumbling, granite lighthouse tower, standing impossibly in the deep water, waves breaking over its base. Its lantern room was dark, but as his light passed over it, a faint, answering glow kindled within a dim, smoky oil flame. In that moment of dual illumination, Julian saw figures on the gallery of the old tower. Silhouettes, waving slowly out for help, but in a kind of synchronized, beckoning gesture. The satellite phone, which had been dead, rang. A voice, choked with static and the sound of wind and clicking clockwork, whispered a single phrase. "The relief watch is here." Then, the phone went dead. His own lamp's emergency power died at that instant, plunging him into total blackness, save for the faint, ghostly glow from the sea. The aftermath is contained in the consortium's internal disciplinary and insurance files. A relief crew arrived after the storm to find Julian Marsh gone. The tower was secure. The digital log's final entry was an automated systems report. But the security camera in the control room, which recorded on an internal drive, showed Julian in the last moments. He is seen turning the manual crank. He stops, looks out the window toward the southeast, his face illuminated by a light source not from within the room. He then walks calmly to the emergency locker, dons a survival suit, and opens the exterior hatch, letting in a blast of rain and wind, before stepping out and closing it behind him. The verification is multi-layered. The security footage is real. The power consumption anomaly from the blackout period was ray-analyzed and found to match the load profile of a much older, carbon arc lamp system, not the modern xenon light. Most hauntingly, a deep-sea survey conducted by the consortium for liability purposes found no granite structure, but the sonar did identify a strange, perfectly cylindrical anomaly in the seabed sediment near the cape. Its dimensions matched the foundation plans for the Victorian lighthouse that was never built. The Tempest Cape Light still operates. Its programming now includes a unique subroutine. If the main lamp fails and the manual override is engaged for more than 5 minutes, the system automatically severs the override mechanism and triggers a locator beacon. The protocol is named, without explanation, Folly's Recall. 11 lights, 11 sentinels standing against the dark, and 11 accounts that challenge our understanding of what that dark contains. We have moved from the clockwork horror of Griffin Rock, where a keeper's duty extended beyond his own lifetime, to the temporal trap of High, where a lighthouse served not as a warning, but as a calibration point for forces we cannot name. We have documented the breathing rock of Capelline, the ghostly distress calls of Sentinel Point, and the echoing memory of the Lady's Mercy, forever sinking just outside the door. These are not random hauntings. They form a pattern, a dossier of intrusion. They speak of places where the barrier between our world and something else wears thin, where the roles we assign keeper, watcher, guardian are usurped or mirrored by entities that operate on older, stranger principles. The stained spiral at Gannett's Nest, the closed circuit inversion at Haffron Flats, the tidal gospel of Steety, Brigid's Cradle. Each case, verified by official documents, technical data, and eyewitness testimony, points to a single and settling conclusion. The most remote lighthouses were not just shelters from the storm. In some cases, they were beacons for it, attracting, or perhaps containing phenomena that thrive in absolute isolation. The verification is the common thread. Police reports, Coast Guard logs, declassified technical analyses, and recovered personal effects, these are the foundations of every story you have heard tonight. This is the mission of Verified Nightmare, to sift through the official record and find the truths too disturbing for the official summary. If these accounts have resonated with you, if they have made you look at the distant glow on a dark coastline with a new sense of unease, then your next steps are clear. First, trust your instincts. The keepers in these stories often dismiss the initial, strange event. That small discrepancy, that fleeting shadow, that misplaced sound, it was the first thread in a tapestry of horror. In a world where these stories are verified, your vigilance is your first and best defense. Second, subscribe to Verified Nightmare. Hit that notification bell. We are dedicated to this investigation, to bringing you these compiled dossiers from the edge. In a reality where the documented and the terrifying intersect, staying informed isn't just curiosity, it is awareness. Help our community of truth seekers grow. Like this video. It signals to the platform's algorithms that there is an audience for substantiated horror, pushing our investigations to those who need to hear them. And finally, we turn to you. The verification process never ends. Comment below with your own accounts. Have you experienced something in a remote place that defied explanation? Do you have a family story, a local legend, backed by a curious newspaper clipping or an odd public record? Share it. Every single account is reviewed, researched, and could form the basis of a future presentation. We have reached the end of this particular log. The lights we have discussed still turn. Some are automated, silent, and watched by satellites. Others stand dark, sealed by order of authorities who offer no satisfying explanation. But they all stand as monuments to a simple, verified fact. There are places in this world where the watch is eternal, and the things we keep the light for are already inside. This has been Verified Nightmare. Remember, the most dangerous monsters are often the ones who look just like us. Stay safe.